So last but not least, we're going to look at like how do we know what we're doing and when to do it. Okay, so we're going to talk about when to use the best method to solve quadratic equations. First of all, I have to look at my entire equation as a whole, and I have to notice one very important detail. Does it have an equal sign? If it has an equal sign, I'm going to solve the equation. So I'm looking at the fastest way to solve that equation. So for this very first one, I notice I have a square on one side, and I can take the square root on the other side. So I'm actually going to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to be able to cancel out that square. So I'm left with the x minus 2 underneath. And the square root of 25, if I remember correctly, is plus or minus 5. Very important. When you square root, you're going to get a plus or minus. So now, to solve the problem, I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So that technically, I get x equals plus or minus 5 plus 2. Now, I actually need to do that math. I'm going to do positive 5 plus 2, and I'm going to do a negative 5 plus 2. So that I get 5 plus 2 is 7. Negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. So my final answer is 2 answers. I'm going to give negative 3 and 7 as my solutions. So now, looking at B, I take a look at the entire thing as a whole, and I notice one very important detail is missing. I have no equal sign. Okay, so I'm not solving. I'm just factoring. So I'm going to take a look at it and I'm going to go, okay, it's a trinomial. So I'm either going to take the square root of the first and the last. I can't do that. Or I'm going to go, okay, well, what times what gives me negative 7, but adds to give me a negative 6. Well, the only thing that multiplies to give me a 7 is a 1 and a 7. But who needs to be negative for me to get a negative 6 when they combine? Well, it has to be a positive 1 and a negative 7. So I'm going to write my factors as x plus 1. I forgot to add that negative there, sorry. And then x minus 7. I'm done. That is it. I take it no further. I do not set them equal to 0 and solve them. I do nothing else past this point because I do not have an equal sign. Now looking at C. Again, I take a look at the entire thing and I look at it and I go, oh, again, there is no equal sign, so I am only factoring. So I'm going to look at it and I'm going to figure out, okay, well, it's a trinomial. It's can't take the square root of the first and the last, so I'm going to go, okay, well, maybe what times what gives me negative 5, but adds to give me a negative 2. The only thing that gives me a 5 is going to be a 5 and a 1. I can't add them in any way to give me a 2, so guess what? This method does not work. This is not factorable. So if I were, so I can say that this is not factorable. Now, if I was solving, okay, if this was an equal to, I actually would use the quadratic formula. So we're going to go ahead and solve this by doing the quadratic formula. So I know I'm going to use negative b, my a is 1, My b is -2, and my c is -5. So I have a negative b, which is -2, plus or minus the square root b squared, that's -2 squared, minus 4, a is 1, c is -5, all over 2, a is 1. Well, -2 is going to be a +2 plus or minus the square root. -2 squared is 4. -4 times 1 is just -4. -4 times -5 is a +20. All over 2. Shorten that. So then I get 2 plus or minus the square root of 24 over 2. I cannot leave it like this. I need to make sure that I have reduced that square root down as far as it can possibly go. So I need to break it down. So I know I have a 2 plus or minus. I have to break down that 24. I know the factors of 24 are 4 and 6. Again, over 2. The only thing that I can take the square root of is that 4. So I'm going to pull it out. So I get 2 plus or minus. Again, I take the square root of that 4, which is 2, over square root of 6, over 2. Now, there is one thing that the top and the bottom all have in common. There's a 2 on the outside, and a 2 on the bottom. Every single expression or term, every single term has a 2 in it. So I can actually take and pull that 2 out of all of it so that I get 1 plus or minus the square root of technically a 1, but we'll just say that this is square root of 6 over a 1. That 1 on the bottom doesn't really mean anything. So I know I get 1 plus or minus the square root of 6 as my final reduced, fully reduced answer. Now, again, if I just said use the best method to work the quadratic equation, I would have said, oh, there's no equal sign, so I'm not solving, so this is not factorable. But if I told you to solve, well, then you're going to actually end up using the quadratic method because you could not use other methods. Now, 14. It says find all the solutions to the following higher order polynomial functions. All right, looking at A. Very first thing I notice, I have a quartic. It's actually a 4. Don't get scared by this. You still only have 3 terms. So you are still going to work with a trinomial. You're just going to factor a trinomial. I will, however, tell you that these exponents, the highest exponent you have, tells you how many solutions you're going to have. So this first equation, it has 4 solutions or 4 answers because of that exponent. But I'm going to work it like I would any other trinomial. So I'm going to look at it and I'm going to go, okay, can I take the square root of x to the 4th and can I take the square root of 10? I can't. So I know I'm going to go, okay, well, what times what gives me 10? And what plus what gives me -7? Well, what are the numbers that give me 10? 2 and 5. Can I add them in a way to get a -7? Yes. I need a -2 and a -5. And it just so happens when I multiply those, I get a +10. So I will do my factors of, because it starts with an x to the 4th, when I break it down, it will be an x squared minus 2 and an x squared minus 5. because when I go to multiply these two things together, I will get x squared times x squared is x to the 4th. Okay, so remember that whenever you see it to the power of 4. And technically, because it has an equal sign, we need to finish the problem. We need to solve it. So I'm actually going to take each one of these, x squared minus 2, set it equal to 0, and x squared minus 5, set it equal to 0. Now, if you know x squared minus 2, you're going to move that 2 to the other side, which will make it a positive 2. So you'll get x squared equals 2. You'll get x squared equals 5. Well, you're not done. You need to take the square root of both of those to solve them completely, so that you end up with, running out of space, so I'm going to move the answers over here. You end up x equals plus or minus the square root of 2. And again, you also end up with x equals plus or minus the square root of 5. These are your 4 answers, because you'll have a positive square root of 2, negative square root of 2, positive square root of 5, negative square root of 5. So that's it. Now, B. I notice, first and foremost, I have 4 terms. So I'm going to have to use grouping. That's the only one method that I can use for 4 terms. But I do notice I have a cube. So when I go to solve, because I have an equal to sign, I know I'm going to have 3 solutions. So I'm going to group. I group the first 2. Group the second 2. I have an x squared in common between them. I have a negative 6 in common between them. I pull them to the front and do my division. X cubed divided by x squared is x. All I have left is an x minus 4. I pull that negative 6 out front, and again, I'm left with an x minus 4. Remember, when I group, these two things must be the same. So now I can write it as x squared minus 6 in one and x minus 4 in the other. Please remember, to solve, you have to set them equal to 0 and actually solve. So you add 4 to this side. Your first one is x equals 4. The second one, you end up with x squared equals 6, but because it's a square, you have to take the square root to solve, so that you end up with x equals plus or minus the square root of 6. You cannot break that 6 down any further, so your 2 answers will be plus or minus the square root of 6 and 4. So you have 3 solutions. Now C. Very important thing to note. I notice I'm missing something. There is no equal sign. So I am just going to factor and only factor. So I'm going to look at it. I notice, regardless, I'm going to have 4 solutions. Okay? And I notice it is a difference, and I can take the square root of both of those things. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I take the square root of x to the 4th and the square root of 81. Square root of x to the 4th, well, it's just x squared. Square root of 81 is minus 9. Now, because this is a difference of squares, you must put x squared plus 9. Make a little note for you. I did this because it is a difference of squares. Okay, he told me exactly how I was going to work the problem. So I get an x squared minus 9 and an x squared plus 9. Now, I'm not done. I actually notice something else. this first one is also a difference of squares. So I'm actually going to take and break him down even further by, again, taking the square root. Remember, I cannot take the square roots of him. I cannot do a difference of squares for him because he is a sum of squares. So I break this down. It is x minus 3. And because it's a difference of squares, I have an x plus 3. And then this guy, well, you just bring him down because you cannot factor him any further. So he is x squared plus 9. So we end up with 3 factors, with that last factor being our 2 solutions because it is a square. And we are done. If you have any questions, remember, email me, send me messages on Remind, whatever you need to do, I'm here for you. Have a great evening.